Well, in your opinion, I guess, I mean, you work in the gambling industry and there are land-based casinos here. Would you say that when they say South African citizens, some of whom are indebted and living in poverty, that our economy could handle it, or that South Africans do have money to kind of play in the gambling realm?
Oh yes, no. In fact, as we say, we estimate that as of March 2014, this country lost about 110 million in terms of just gambling tax. I have not included VAT and or corporate tax in terms of that. So certainly we are participating it. The people do have money to gamble online, and they are gambling. And it has shown, even on the revenues that casinos have made. You know, end of last year, March 2014, we only grew by 0.6% as compared to the previous year growth of 10.4%. So that should be an indication of how much money people spend actually on these places.
But do you think people are spending money they don't have? I mean, there's a huge amount of poverty in South Africa.
No, that would be a very difficult argument to sustain, especially with online gambling, because for that obviously you need to have either a mobile device that can access internet or a computer. So you need the tools to be able to gamble, and generally I think in all cases you will need a credit card. And I'm not sure it's necessarily the poorest of the poor that have credit cards, because they have to meet certain requirements in terms of the National Credit Act, and therefore we cannot argue that it's the poorest of the poor that will be playing online.
Now I want to talk about some of those tools and controls that you were speaking about. What kind of implementations would be put in place to make sure that people who are gambling online, if it was made legal, are of age and the proper checks have been made?
Obviously, I wouldn't talk about South African tools because there has been any. But if you took Norway as a case study, before you could gamble, you can gamble. You must create an account, usually linked to your bank account, and obviously there's limits that they set in specifically in Norway, in terms of how much you can play and how much you can lose. Rules around if you win something, it doesn't go to your account. As in the player account, it goes back to your bank account, so that you have to make another effort and decision to transfer it back to your player account if you want to play. They enforce mandatory breaks, so meaning that after a while the system will shut down because you've been gambling for 2 hours sitting in your bedroom. It will say, no, it's not time to get off. So there are a number of controls that they introduced, and they seem to be working for that jurisdiction.
Well, that seems like a really good case study in Norway. Is that what we're seeing across the world? Do most online casinos put in these same implementations, or are there some that kind of leave the gamblers to have free range?
No, certainly. There's it's not everyone that is out there that is a good ethical business, which is why, even though they know very well that in South Africa it's illegal to gamble online, they still take bets from South Africa and they play with South Africans. So those are not ethical people. The number of states that have actually allowed it are not as big as people who want to anticipate. For example, if you take the United States, only 4 states have legalized online gambling. The rest of the difference between 52 and 4 is 48 or something.
Only 4 states?
4 states in the United States.
Oh, okay.
In Europe is probably the leading continent in terms of number of jurisdictions, probably 8 or so. In Africa, you have Malawi that has introduced it. Sorry, is it Kenya?
Kenya, okay.
Kenya. There was an operation in Swaziland, but it was shut down as soon as they couldn't offer gambling to South Africans. But so we're not far behind in terms of what's happening internationally with respect to online gambling.
Now, someone has sent through a tweet. David Braz, he says, I think it can be quite risky as it's easily accessible, thus anyone with an addiction can get carried away quickly when speaking about online gambling. What's your response to that? How can we manage what people are doing online, especially if someone has an addiction and it's right there on their computer or their phone? They don't need to get into their car and drive to the casino.
Correct. If it's properly regulated, one of the things you could look at is limiting the number of amount they can play, either on the day or per week or per month. So you could say, for argument's sake, you cannot play more than 1,000 rands on any particular day, 2,000 over a week, or 3,000 over a month. So you can, and obviously being a system, it will simply not allow you to to go ahead. People will say, then what if I open more than one account? But you can't, because if you use your ID to register, you can only really have one player account.
But you would think an addict wouldn't have that same sense to set their own limitations. That's how they became an addict.
You would have to regulate it. You would have to say, this is the maximum that you can play on any single day.
So the player regulates it?
No, the government. The laws will have to say the maximum, the minimum, or the maximum play that can be played is this much. Obviously, at this stage, we making hypothetical cases
because it's not.
We don't know what's going to happen. Correct.
Yes.